Four Wheel City, Self-Care Sunday. Yo, I'm like self-care on Sundays with a day off on Monday. Private jet on the runway, taking off, going one way to the top. Whoa. Who said the sky is the limit when I'm high is my vision? On Facebook Live, going live in a minute. Don't mind me, I'm just minding my business. Breaking news, doing interviews, but it's not about me, I'm doing this for you. Matter of fact, no, I'm doing this for proof that a self-care Sundays and dreams come true. They really do.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Self-Care Sundays podcast. We are excited for this week's guest, Kat Calvin of Spread the Vote. But before we get started, I want to ask for your help supporting the podcast via Patreon. Patreon allows supporters of the show to donate a monthly amount to help with our costs, including monthly maintenance fees and to pay our audio engineer. We'd also like to raise enough money to hire a transcription service to make our episodes more accessible to everyone. If you'd like to help us out, please check our patreon.com/selfcaresundayspodcast. That's patreon.com/selfcaresundayspodcast. Thank you in advance. It's the generosity of our listeners that helps this information be accessible to so many people in the first place. And we are so excited to have Kat as our first guest for season 2. Kat, how are you today?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you doing?
I am good. There is a massive thunderstorm in Dallas, Texas right now, so sorry if the connection goes bad.
No worries. So I'd like to start off with just a really kind of basic question, which is, what are your self-care habits and how did you develop them?
It's ironic that you asked me that today because it was a pretty terrible day. So I've actually been thinking about, okay, what am I going to do today to bring myself back? The self-care methods that I've developed are partially things that just sort of make sense to me because of who I am in my life, and partially things that as I've gotten older, I've thought, okay, these are things that make sense or that I think I need to do. I grew up, being pretty athletic and playing sports and stuff. And so working out and going to the gym regularly is really important as a way to sort of maintain my sanity. But then day to day, I already went swimming. I'll probably go back to the gym because it's that or eat ice cream, and the gym is healthier. I'm also, definitely food and making big comfort salads which I know a comfort salad sounds ridiculous, but there actually is such a thing. I already had a comfort taco salad today, or a glass of wine or whatever. Those things are easier, and also are things where I know, okay, I'm, for instance, eating something that tastes really good, but I'm also being sure to add a lot of things to it that are going to internally make me feel better. I also, I have a PlayStation and a Nintendo Switch, and playing those are great because I can't really pay attention to work while I'm doing it. So I'm forced to shut off and just play Lego Star Wars or whatever. So things like that are really helpful. There are some things that I do when I get a chance. I'm really big on active meditation because I'm not great at regular meditation, which we'll talk about. But for instance, my favorite sport is art. And when you're shooting a bow, you have to think of 119 things with every shot. So there's literally no space in your brain to think about anything except the thing you're doing. And so for me, whenever I get to do that, which when I'm home is, every weekend at least, it's, a couple of hours that literally I'm thinking about nothing except the 119 things that I have to think about every minute when I'm shooting an arrow. And so active meditation like that, swimming is similar. I can't really think too much while I'm swimming. Running is a thing I do when I want to think because there's nothing to do but think while you run. So knowing sort of what activities I can do that are going to force me to take my mind off of something. I'm super type A, and I'm a super overthinker, and I'm a super over self-reflector. And so being able to force myself to stop thinking is really important. And then I've been doing, this is my second year of doing challenges, year-long challenges, to try to force myself to do a thing that I know is good for me, whether I want to do it or not. So last year I did 365 days of yoga, which I do them every year on my birthday. I treat my birthday like the new year, and it's when I, reflect and really think about where I've been and where I'm going, etc. And so would have been October of 16, I decided, I'm going to do yoga every day for a year. And everything about my life and the country completely changed. And I ended up being on the road constantly for half of it. And everything sort of changed. But every day, even if it was at 1 a.m. before I crashed into bed, I was forced to sit down and do yoga and, pay attention to that. And I'm doing a meditation challenge for every day for a year. Where I'm, having to, for at least 10 minutes a day, sit down and meditate. And it's usually before bed. I am not good at like getting up and doing structured things in the morning. It doesn't happen. So it's always before bed. And then the way that I found to keep myself accountable is I have probably the most boring Instagram account of all time because I never remember to take pictures of my food. I'm usually hungry, but I every single day will post like, meditation 365 day. I think yesterday was 167 maybe, and so that it's really obvious to anybody looking and to me if I miss a day. And so I have to, and there have been times where I've woken up and it's been like 2 a.m. and I've been like, oh my God, meditate. And then I have to meditate so I can post on Instagram so it's in the right order. And that's been really, really helpful for accountability. So those are, I have like a bunch of things I do, but those are a lot of the ways that I sort of try to incorporate being really mindful of who I am and how I work and how my mind works and how I manage or don't manage stress, and then trying to incorporate things that control that or alleviate that or manage that throughout my day.
So as you're mentioning using Instagram as like a public kind of accountability mechanism, I'm wondering, does it make hard for you to like set social media boundaries if you're using that as an accountability platform? I'm wondering how it changes or doesn't change your relationship with social media.
I don't know. I don't really think about boundaries that much. I mean, I'm on Twitter all day, every day, ranting about things. Before Facebook came out, my like junior year in college, Instagram and Twitter, I was in law school or after when those things started. So I don't have the same need or not even need, but maybe just, habit that younger people have of sharing everything constantly and et cetera, because my entire developing years, these things didn't exist. And even when Facebook started, I was like, this is ridiculous. So for me, using something as an accountability tool is just what it is. And I post a thing up there, put a little check mark that I did it. But it's not, I don't really think about sort of boundaries because it's not something that really permeates my life that much. Instagram, at least. Twitter is totally part of my life.
That's so interesting because in season 1, when we were talking about self-care and like how people conceptualize self-care, people talked about boundaries a lot. So for you, is kind of not thinking about boundaries, is that unique to like social media because you don't have those habits, or do you think that boundaries are just generally not as important for self-care?
Well, I mean, I think self-care looks different for everyone, and how you sort of operate and what your life looks like and what your brain looks like and everything. I've never really thought about it. I also, my life is much weirder than most people's. I live on the road running a nonprofit, like changing hotel to hotel and car to car, and I'm always in a different city. So I don't have like a social life or whatever because right now I'm in Texas and I'm here and there. So and I don't have, sort of kids and family that I have to sort of manage what that time is or whatever. So I don't really think about boundaries, I think, in the same way. I just sort of, I don't know, live my life. I honestly, I don't even really know how to answer that question.
I ask, so it is like, it's obviously true that like, you're not like a lot of people when they're talking about boundaries, they're thinking about it, as you're saying, in the context of like their time and family, and your time is really your own in that way. And I'm wondering if that was like a choice you made on purpose. I think you and I've talked about that a little bit outside of the podcast, that, choosing to kind of be your own boss and have your own, and be the person who sets your own schedule and all of that, if you feel like that creates kind of autonomy in a way that's unique.
Yes. I don't know if it's so much of a choice as it's just who I am. I don't do well working for other people because I always want to do things my way. And, sort of the way I live my life right now, the way that I make it work, given the way our organization works, given, the sort of economic and social and legal boundaries that we have to live within. So, I didn't necessarily yes, I made the choice that this is how I was going to live my life, but I made the choice because I crunched the numbers and this was the only way it would work. I'm, working for myself. It's sort of the same thing. It's, I work for myself because I have a mission and a vision and a goal and a way that I want to do it and a way that I think will be most successful that no one else is pursuing. So I have to do it myself. I also, though, grew up with a Black mother who came home every day from work and said, here are all of the things that happened to me today. You're never going to get a fair shot, to me and my brother being black and female in the workplace. Work for yourself. So again, I kind of I don't know how much was a choice by my mother informing me as a child, and me having been in many workplaces as an adult, being like, oh yeah, no, this is not a space that works for, Black women who stand up for themselves. And I am very fortunate that I have always been able to make the choice to say, I don't have to put up with this and I'm leaving, which a lot of women don't. My mother had to put up with a lot because she had 2 kids to raise. She had to put me through college and all these things. And I don't have those responsibilities. So I can say, no, I deserve to be respected and I deserve to run things the way I want to. So I guess partially it's a choice, partially it's just who I am. But, I think that when, going back to sort of the boundaries question, then yeah, there aren't the way that the lines of my life are drawn. There's really not lines. It's just one big blob, right? Like I just work constantly because of the nature of travel. It's because I really love what I'm doing. It's because when you're starting a new thing, you have to do it 24 hours a day. And so there aren't boundaries or like work-life balance. Like it is my life, but that's just the way it is. And it works for me. And there's not really that much else I'd want to be doing. I'm not like, I could not be less interested in like dating or having kids. I got a dog and he's adorable. But half the time I'm like, oh, I'm taking you for a walk and I could be checking emails. So like for me, it's just the way my life is.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I was just curious about kind of your perspective. And you got into this a little bit about how your identity has shaped the way you think about your life. And I'm curious about the habits that you mentioned kind of went through in the beginning. I'm curious how you came upon them, how you came upon like the idea of swimming, or like how did you discover these different habits? Because it seems like you have a really robust set of habits and I'm wondering, like, was that something that happened over time? Did you discover a bunch of things at once? Was there a point where you started to take this stuff really seriously? I'm wondering how you built the habits besides the new ones that you're currently building.
I mean, partially it's the privilege of being a single woman who's only ever had to think about herself. And when I'm honest with myself, the only reason that my adorable new dog, Geordie LaForge, drives me crazy is because it's the first time I've ever had to think about someone other than myself. And I'm like, what? All of my time is my own. So I've had an insane amount of time to just like self-reflect every day. And there are things that I love. I grew up playing sports every year. And so that's just a natural thing for me. I love working out. I love being active. I'm always looking for new things. That's how I discovered archery. Is I was like, I want to try something new. This looks fun. And then I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing on earth. I started running years ago. Like, oh, you know what? I've never really. I started swimming for a couple of reasons. One, running does, for me, it really impacts my knees and ankles, and my body just doesn't respond to it as well. And I spend all of my time in hotels, which always have swimming pools that usually no one is using. And one day I was like, dude, you live in hotels, like just start swimming. And then as soon as I started, I realized it's way harder than running, and it's a really good workout, and it has no impact on my joints. And because I also lift weights in between days, it's like an amazing way to recover from that and to do really good full body workouts and cardio without the same impact that running has on my joints. So, that sort of turned that in. And, I'm always looking for new sports. I'm doing my first Spartan race in a few weeks, which I am terrified of. And I'll probably die. This may be my last podcast ever. Because I'm always looking for new things to do. When I did the yoga challenge, it's because yoga, I like really like intense, impactful things, which is why I'm like Spartan race. And like heavy weights. And it's really hard to force myself to do things like yoga, which are really good for me, but they're excruciatingly painful and very sort of slow. And I have to force myself to do it. And so the things that I know I should be doing, like now meditation, but that are hard to make myself do, are the types of things where I'm like, all right, if I do something where I have to do it every day for a year, then that's going to help me implement it into my life. Same with cooking. My mom is a great cook, and we grew up, having to always have colorful plates and eat lots of fruits and vegetables and whatever. And I love cooking, and I'm really, I have a French fry addiction. That should be my next self-care thing. But I'm afraid to do a 365-day no French fry challenge because I'll probably fail. I love cooking. And I've been a vegan for a while now. And I'm always trying to be, better at that and be a good vegan and eat well and like figure out how to eat well on the road. So like one thing I do is right now I'm in a hotel with a kitchen, and wherever I can find an affordable hotel that has kitchen space, then that's where I stay so that I can cook on the road. And like I travel with my Vitamix and Instant Pot, which is a little ridiculous, but when you spend months on end traveling, you have to. So like, it's all.
Why did you become a vegan? Like you kind of talked about growing up, the mom was like with an emphasis on food, but why why be a vegan? Why not be a vegetarian? Like, was there a journey to that?
No, I did. I literally did. One day I ate everything. One day I became a vegan. So I'm super type A. I did a ton of research, and there really wasn't any reason not to. When you look at climate change and the environment, when you look at animal rights, of course, when you look at your own health, you look at human rights, we look at who is actually working in factory farms and how they're treated. It's mostly illegal immigrants. Or we do this awful thing where we will bring immigrants from, developing countries into the States and say, oh, guess what? You're going to work on a farm. And then we put them in factory farms. And I think that's one of the most cruel things you can do to a human. The factory farms are usually in Black communities and low income communities of color where they're polluting the water and the air. And, the more research I did, the more I was like, I can't justifiably, look in the mirror and say that I'm an activist, say that I care about these things, say that I want to find impactful ways to, improve the Black community, say that I care about the climate when I'm eating in a way that is not truthful to that. And, there was this sort of thought, well, would I be vegan or vegetarian? But it took about 5 minutes at looking at, what the lives of male baby chicks and all these things, as well as just what dairy sort of does to your body. And, like everyone else in my family, if I'm honest with myself, I'm pretty lactose intolerant anyways. So it just, there wasn't a justifiable way for me to not be vegan, which I'd done the research because of who I say I am. That being said, I am not perfect at it. I know all these people who, especially in, sort of LA, who are like, oh, I read this book one day and then I never touched meat again. And I'm like, I wish I could be like that. But, it's hard and you're bombarded every day. One day I counted when I was still working as a lawyer in LA, and I had like a 25-minute commute, and I counted all of the fast food restaurants and billboards and advertisements I saw from my office to my house. And I don't remember the number, but it was like an insane is because everywhere you look, you're being bombarded with these messages. If you watch a 30-minute TV commercial, you're probably going to see like 12 hamburger ads. And so it's a constant struggle for me to be as ethical as I want to be and as healthy as I want to be and, as plant-based as I want to be. But I think that I have a responsibility to do my best to try because of the things I say I care about and the person I want to be.
That makes a lot of sense. It's interesting that you kind of rooted this in saying that you're not perfect. I saw on your website that you say you're no expert on politics, policy, and grassroots activism, which surprised me because I think a lot of people would think you're an expert on a lot of those things. So I'm wondering, if and how you ever feel the need to like prove yourself in your work and if you view like self-care as kind of a balance to kind of some of the interruptions that life brings at you.
That's funny. I think there are things that I am slowly becoming an expert in. I think that I am certainly one of two people in the country who I think, we can call ourselves experts in scalably and sustainably getting IDs for people in multiple locations across the country, right? Like me and Molly McGrath are kind of the ones doing that work.
And just so for people who don't know, you're doing that vote in the context of like voter ID laws, right? Trying to like help people who are otherwise unable to get IDs to vote, helping them to obtain them.
Yes, exactly. It probably would help if I said what Spread the Vote does. But yes, we get IDs for eligible voters in voter ID states. My hope is that once we reach all 20 of those, then we'll branch out to all 50 states. But yes, with the goal being that we get people IDs that they can use to vote, but that they can also use every day of the year for jobs, housing, et cetera. So, there's some things I have a pretty objective view of myself in some way, nobody really does. But in that, I am not the smartest person in the world on 85,000 different things. But there are a couple of things that I have figured out and that I've worked really hard on and that I'm great at. One of the things that I've worked on for most of my adult life is figuring out, okay, how do we use technology to help facilitate on the ground grassroots action, which is something that's very much coming into play with the way we operate Spread the Vote. So there's some things, but, I read books every day. I'm reading this fantastic book called This Is an Uprising right now. I'm constantly trying to read and learn more about how to be a better organizer, how to be a better leader, how to be a better manager, all those things. So I would not call myself an expert in community organizing or action. I would say, like Heather Booth is an expert in those things, right? Like Stokely Carmichael was an expert. Maybe if I'm really lucky in 30 years, I'll be able to say I'm a true expert. But until then, I'm fair at it. I am not perfect at it. But I'm working to get there. And I've certainly done more than many people, but I am constantly trying to learn, and I think that So it's interesting. Part of the reason that today was so bad is that I'm constantly trying to balance the things I know and know well and know how to do with trying to be sure that I am, approaching things in a way, with humility and listening to other people. But one thing that I was lucky, I think that my mother did, really tried to instill in me was you have to be humble and, self-reflective, and understanding and a good listener, but you have to draw a line at a place where you demand respect for yourself. And
that sounds like a boundary, Kat.
You know what? There you go. Boundary number one. It is. You're right. It is. It's a boundary. And it's, I had to sort of draw a line in the sand today with some people and say, look, there is a level to which I'm willing to hear you and I'm willing to change things or do whatever. But there's also a level at which I know just either instinctively or because I have sent this email to 4 people and they've all told me the same thing, where it's like, no, I've done everything I can and this is now a you problem and I don't have to deal with a you problem. And for me, what isn't self-care? But you could certainly couch that as self-care is me. It's really easy when you're leading an organization, and this is the 4th organization I've run, and especially a volunteer organization, to want to sell yourself short or sell yourself out because you want to try too hard to sort of lay down the red carpet for other people. And I do work hard to try to make sure I have that boundary, because there are very few things that make me feel bad as when I know I've allowed someone to disrespect me.
The best advice I got when I was starting Resistance Manual was not to be afraid to fire volunteers.
Oh yeah. Oh, that is such a key skill.
But I think you're totally right that there's a notion, particularly with a with a volunteer driven organization, that you feel like, oh no, we want to be like welcoming and we'll teach you how to do this stuff. And like, we're not even paying these people. We really want them here. But like, I think my experience was, and it sounds like yours has been as well, that like a few toxic people can really kind of silence everyone else. And it's like, you think that actually the first time I did a survey with the Resistance Manual volunteers, I realized the loudest feedback was actually the minority of feedback. And once we started moving in a direction away from what their feedback was, those folks left and everyone else got a lot more involved. And I think it's not something that's immediately apparent, and it's a really hard thing to do because it's scary, I think, to draw a boundary in that context.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, toxic is the right word. And it's, I had some situations a couple of orgs ago where I really had to learn this, and where I was also in my sort of like mid-20s where you're still trying to sort of figure things out, and where I had to realize like, oh, I need that person gone now, because, my big thing is, I definitely want to and need to demand respect for myself. But also, like, if I'm the person who's in charge and in running something and you feel comfortable treating me a certain way, then now I have to think about, well, how are you treating my staff and how are you treating other volunteers and the people we're serving? And it trickles down. And what's the culture that you're, the cultural message that you're sending to other volunteers and things like that. And so you do have to make that cut, because you always have to thinking about the greater good of your organization, and that culture will kill you faster than anything else does.
Yeah, totally. And so I'm curious, for those of us who are not type A and super disciplined.
Who's that?
Well, it's interesting. I think I'm type A about some things, but I don't think I'm always very disciplined. So I'm curious if you've always been a disciplined person in terms of like, hey, I want to start doing this thing and I'm going to do it, or kind of how you developed that over time. Something I've heard other folks talk about is the ability to delay gratification and to realize like, hey, I know I want to go to sleep right now, but if I just do this, I'm going to feel better. Like, and I'm wondering kind of, when it's, as you were saying, when it's like the end of the day and you're tired and you just want to go to sleep, like, how do you get yourself to sit down and do the yoga or do the meditation? Like, what's kind of the self-talk that's happening there?
There's a reason that I have had to put public accountability measures into place. I have to shame myself into doing those things. I would definitely have been the kid who just ate the one marshmallow right away instead of waiting for the 2, unless I knew people were watching me from the double-sided glass, and then I would wait for the 2 because I would have wanted them to know that I was the smartest, best behaved girl in the room who could wait for the marshmallows. And so, like, I know this about myself. There are for me, having that public accountability is really important. There are things that just come naturally to me that, don't necessarily to other people, like, oh, I'm just going to like start a nonprofit and do this thing because it makes sense to me. But then there are a lot of things that come naturally to other people that I am just not the one. But I know myself well enough to know, all right, having accountability, like having people watch me on Instagram, like knowing I have to do this Spartan race. And if I am the last, if I die, I will be embarrassed in front of a lot of other people. Like I put these measures into place. When I was learning to run, I bought, I registered for races of different lengths ahead of time. So I knew, all right, you have to do this because you just paid $75 for this like half marathon. So either get it together or you're gonna be really embarrassed. I put public measures in place. And then I know like there are some things that I want to be better at that I'm either too embarrassed to do publicly or oh no, I actually just remembered a thing. Okay, so this is hilarious. This podcast is great. So, oh no,
Say that again. This podcast is great. Keep saying it.
This podcast is great. So I just discovered this app, and oh god, oh man, I hope that I haven't messed it up. So I just discovered this app called Stick, STICKK, and you can set a goal and then they will take money out of your account, and you can either have them donate to a charity of your choice, or you can have them take money and donate to an anti-charity. So I have a goal, and I have $20 a week that's being donated to the NRA if I don't succeed in my goal. The reason I just freaked out is because I just realized that, oh no, tomorrow's Saturday. Oh, thank God. Because it's every Saturday you're supposed to check in. And I was like, oh my God, if I didn't check in, then did they give money to the NRA? So that one is a really good one, especially if you have a goal you don't want to tell other people about. Because like, I know that if money's going to the NRA, I am not going to do whatever thing I said I wasn't going to do, because that would be like the worst thing in the world. I don't want them to have it sent. So, for me, having all those different types of accountability and public shaming or whatever are really important, because I'm not a naturally super disciplined person. And I have so many friends who are just so amazing, and they're just able to like have a goal and do it and complete it, and are just perfect at everything. And I am not that person. And I know that. So I put as many different measures in place as possible to keep me accountable.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like what you're doing, which I think is really smart, and something I try to do is like, you've kind of figured out the ways to like put guardrails around yourself, where it's like, look, I know that like, and you also have figured out what works to hold you accountable. So like for me, I really liked your Instagram post idea, and I tried doing it for a little bit, and I realized that like Seamus does not work for me. Like I really embraced the Brene Brown, like, do not allow yourself to be shamed thing to a fault, like to a fault. Because I think there are ways that shame can be negative, right? And like internalizing other people's, impressions of you or whatever. But I like went way too far with that. And so it doesn't work for me, but
that is so
but I think it's so smart that you figured out ways to turn what can be kind of negative things into positive things, that you're gonna like, hey, I'm not gonna let people shame me for things like you're saying, or like disrespect me in ways, but I know that I'm sensitive to other people's impressions of me, and so I'm gonna make sure that that you've used that as a way to serve yourself, not to serve others.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about, for me, it's how do I use these things I know about myself to force myself to be better. And like, when I'm in a race, I am never going to win like the New York Marathon. And that is fine with me. I just don't want to be last place. If I'm second to last, honestly, I'm okay with that. But oh my God, I don't want to be last, right? Like that's my like shame thing is I'm not going to win a Spartan race next month. That's cool. But if I am the last person to finish it, I will probably just like throw myself into the mud pit. And so like, it's just for me knowing that if I have a day missing on my Instagram challenge for meditation, like I will always feel totally shamed about that. And like it's because it's there and it's so visual and everyone can see it. And so, yeah. And I think that's, why self-care works differently for everyone, and why goal setting looks different for everyone. And why, it's great that there are just 500 million options, is because the things that I love to do, the things that I am able to do or not able to do based on, my life, they're different, and they're different for everyone. But there's always a way to incorporate something that works for you into your life.
I'm gonna close out there because that is just such a perfect natural ending point, and that's really what we're doing this season on the podcast, is just talking to different people about the different ways that they have found to habitualize self-care. And the reason we're doing it is because I'm trying to figure out how to do that. And so my podcast is very, in that way, self-indulgent. But for me, my kind of ethos is I'm so fortunate to have all these amazing people who I can ask these questions to. And hey, I should share that knowledge and information with other people because I'm so lucky to have access to those who could share it with me. So to close out, I would like to thank everyone for listening to another episode of Self-Care Sundays. And before we wrap up here, I want to offer a special shout out to those who have already pledged on our Patreon. Their generosity makes our show possible. We're especially grateful for the support of our super contributors, Vicky B, Renu J, Brady K, Bill S, and Embershot. If you'd like to support the show and hear your name at the end of our podcast, please check out patreon.com/Self-Care Sundays podcast. Again, that's patreon.com/Self-Care Sundays podcast. Also give us a follow on Twitter at Self-Care Sundays and on Facebook at Self-Care Sundays. Kat, do you want to share your Twitter?
Sure. You can find me at Kat Calvin LA, or you can find Spread the Vote at Spread the Vote US.
Great. And on behalf of our producer, Jess Talwar, and our audio engineer, Kato Zane, thank you for tuning in today, and we will see you on our next episode.